When I came back to my senses and I could finally look away, instinctively, in my confusion, the first thing I did was text my soul sister, "Did you see that too?" Like, I just knew it was aliens. And I went to her and I woke her up in the middle of the night. I told her, "Oh my God, I think there is an alien ship out there." Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to my brand new YouTube video. This is a special video. This is the Halloween special, and I'm super excited for this. I did a Halloween special last year on my podcast, and you guys loved it. So I thought I would share another creepy but real story from my life, tell you all the details, all the spooky little details, how it happened, when it happened, what happened. I obviously hope to spook you out a little bit, but I also hope that you will have a mind expanding experience through me telling my story and me sharing what I'm gonna share. And I've never shared this. I actually feel a little bit nervous about sharing this. I also feel a little bit nervous about this incense and the fire alarm right next to it. We will see how that goes. My name is Isabelle Gloria. I'm a spiritual leadership mentor and spiritual teacher, and I upload a video every week. I also have a podcast, so you can also listen to this video as a podcast. It's rooted in the cosmos. It's available on every known podcast platform, so make sure to check that out as well if you prefer podcast over video. And if you want to stick with me here on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any upcoming video. Before I go into the spooky story that is waiting for you today, I just want to take a moment to remind you how powerful this time of the year is. Halloween is a very commercialized event, I know that, but on a spiritual level, this time of the year is when the veil is really thin, when a lot of connections to our ancestors are possible, to our cosmic guides, to beings of other dimensions. And even though that's possible at all times, the month of October and November are very, very different. The air in October and November is just different. The veil is thinner. The spirits are almost communicating to us rather than we want to communicate with them. And it's just a very powerful time to practice meditation, to practice connecting with your guide, to practice anything that helps you access your consciousness. Another reason why the veil is so thin is also because a lot of people are becoming aware of the spirit world. Maybe in a playful way, maybe not in an actual serious way, but we are projecting a lot of energy into the world that says, "Hey, there's ghosts and there's spirits and there's witches and there's all these like things that we as a collective usually don't concern ourselves with." So that also creates this energy of the veil thinning and this portal, almost like a portal opening for you to tap into and also tap into your own gifts. If you are a light worker today, you can almost count on it that you have been a witch during the times of the witch trials. You have so much past as a soul, and you can tap into this energy that is still part of you. And even though this most likely is a painful memory because witches have not been treated well in the past, the gifts and the insight and the connectedness to earth and to nature and to the nature spirits, that's all still inside of you. So I really want to encourage you to take this magical season, the spooky season, not only to carve pumpkins, but to also go within and connect with your spirit guides, connect with your ancestors, connect with your own past lives, and download the wisdom and the knowledge that is stored within you somewhere. Enough preaching and enough of me showing my appreciation for the spooky season. Let's get into the story. I actually never told this in any way, shape, or form. I always wanted to preserve this story for a special occasion, and I even had a conversation with my soul sister the other day. Should I really share this? Like, is my YouTube channel popular enough yet? I really want people to hear what I'm saying because it was so impactful for me. And she was like, "You can share that story as often as you want, and maybe you should just share it don't care about numbers or about when it would be best to share it so a lot of people can hear it because it's so precious to me. So I listened to her advice and I'm just going to share it now with you. It was a weekend. It was late at night or early in the morning, like 2 a.m., 2:30 a.m. And I was up late. So I was working on my laptop. I forgot the time and I was like, oh my God, it's so late. I'm going to go to bed. So I walked to my front door because I always check if the door is locked before I go to bed. I walked to my front door thinking nothing of it, and I wanted to check if the door is locked. And then I wanted to go about my night and go to sleep. That didn't happen that night. So as I looked through the small window, the door has like a small window that shows like um, a forest and a hill. And I was looking through that and I saw a huge bright light. It wasn't coming from a car. It wasn't coming from any street light. It wasn't coming from anything that I could make sense of because it was so huge. My first thought, and that's kind of funny, my first thought was, is the moon falling down? Because it was so large and so bright and so blinding without being blinding. It was a very, very strange sensation. It was a very strange light. I've never seen a light as bright as this one and as wide and as like captivating, but I also wasn't blinded at all. It was like looking into a portal of light, but it didn't blind me. It was just there and it was so bright. It was pure light. To me, it looked like the moon had fallen down and the lower portion of that light was hidden by the forest that is in that area. So it was this glowing globe almost that was coming up from behind the forest. It looked like a sunset in the ocean, but the sun being like the bright light and the ocean being the trees in front of it. And it was so large. It wasn't anything that I could explain to myself. It wasn't anything that anyone could have turned on or anything that could have come from like a party or a festival or anything in that area. It was just, it literally looked like the moon had fallen to the ground and it was halfway covered by the forest. That's what it looked like to me. Another interesting thing that really confused me was that it did not only not blind me, it also didn't illuminate anything around it. There was this huge white light, but nothing around was lit up. Nothing around it was illuminated. It was like this portal of light, but nothing in the surroundings was touched by that light. It was just opening up from the sky or somewhere, and I could look into that light, but nothing was illuminated by it. It was so large, the whole place should have been lit up, but it wasn't. It was pitch black, and then this huge light. I think you can already tell where this is going. So when I saw that light, my immediate thought was aliens. And it was like that word was coming to me. Back then, it was years ago, it was almost 10 years ago. So back then, I didn't concern myself with aliens, with extraterrestrials, with anything like that. That event actually triggered that for me, but that's another story. I didn't think of aliens in my daily life. I didn't read any books about them. I never really thought about them. I never really had anything to do with extraterrestrials, or I didn't concern myself with them. But the first thing that came to my mind was aliens, and it felt like someone had given me that thought. It was like thrown to me and I was able to pick it up like aliens. And I was so confused because it was like, "Oh my God, I immediately know that this is like a spaceship or some spacecraft, some paranormal stuff going on." And I immediately knew, and it was so clear to me. But at the same time, I also was so confused about that, about the clarity that entered my body. Like I just knew it was aliens. As you can imagine, a lot of panic began to rise in me. I was literally panicking. When I tell this story now to friends or my family, I say it was like my human instincts kicked in, and it was like something that took over, like this fight or flight mode, and I've just froze. And I looked into this light in front of me, and I couldn't look away, even though I was very afraid at this point. I literally panicked internally. I couldn't look away. I was like paralyzed. I couldn't get my eyes off of that light. I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. I couldn't call on anyone. I could do nothing. I was just standing there like a deer in the headlights, being like, oh my God. I actually felt really, really drawn to that light. So, despite my fear and the panic that I could feel, I felt really magnetized by that light and I just had to look at it. And I was looking at it for what felt like a really long time. I can't define how long that was or how short that was. I really cannot tell how long it was. It must have been a couple of minutes, I guess, but I cannot tell how long that was. Time wasn't real in that moment, and I just looked at this light, feeling like I cannot move, I cannot do anything. I'm panicking, but I also cannot look away. It was really strange. When I came back to my senses and I could finally look away, instinctively, in my confusion, the first thing I did was text my soul sister, did you see that too? Because I was so sure everyone around me must have seen that. She was a neighbor, so she lived nearby. And I was so sure that she must have seen it too. Like, who's not up at like 2:30 in the night or 3 a.m. in the night looking at the sky? But in my reality at that moment, I was like, oh my God, everyone has seen this. This is already on the news. The whole neighborhood knows about this. Everyone's looking out their windows. I cannot be the only one who saw that. So I was texting her and literally like with these words, oh my God, did you see that too? And the next morning, she was like, little time jump. The next morning, she was like, what did you text me like last night? That was really confusing. But in my world, in that moment, I was like, oh my God, she knows what I'm talking about. It's so obvious to me. She knows, she absolutely knows. Turns out she didn't. But yeah, that's a funny side story. It was really confusing for her to like wake up and receive that message, and she was like, what was I supposed to see? What I also have to share for this to make sense was that this light was also accompanied by a very weird sound. It was like a deep muffled sound, like a jet engine or something like that. It sounded like something was being moved or held in the air with great pressure, like I cannot make the sound, but it was a really strange, muffled, deep sound, almost like a vibration that I could hear the entire time. And it was very obvious that this was not a plane or anything like that. It was a very weird sound that I could not make sense of, but that was really, really present the entire time. Even when I stopped seeing the light or when I walked away from the light, I could still hear this muffled, deep sound. So imagine me still panicking, still like totally in shock, not knowing what's going on. I was afraid. And what I did was I went to my mom, who was also in the house, and I went to her and I woke her up in the middle of the night. I told her, "Oh my God, I think there is an alien ship out there. Please come and watch that with me. Come watch. I'll show you." We go to the door. We take a little bit of time to go through the house, all that. We go to the door. The light is gone, but the sound is still there. It's far in the distance, but it's still there. And she is my witness. She heard the sound as well. She was not able to see the light, it was already gone, but she was able to hear that muffled, weird sound. And we stood there in front of the door, listening to that sound until it faded. So we both heard that. It was definitely not just me being crazy in that moment. She heard it too. And she was really freaked out by it as well. So, what I did, I obviously couldn't sleep. So, what I did, I Googled reports of alien sightings in that area, and I actually found a report that of a sighting that had been made just like a half an hour ago after my experience. And the description of that was really similar. I don't know if you know that, but you can look that up. It's ufosightings.com or something like that. And you can put in your area, and people can write reports of when they saw or heard or experienced something weird. And a lot of times, there is a lot of them in the same area around the same time. So it's really interesting. Just a side note. Yeah, I looked that up and that solidified this idea within me that this must have been like something extraterrestrial. Like I said, I didn't concern myself with aliens before. I'm now the girl that always talks about aliens and about dimensions and higher dimensions, higher dimensional beings, but I wasn't that back then. That was my first real touching point with them, or my first real experience. So that was all really creepy for me and really scary and really, I don't know. It was a wild night. So, as you can imagine, I also had a very, very difficult time sleeping. And I felt this primal fear within me, like this literally my instincts kicking in and this primal fear of the unknown. Even though I didn't get any evil or malicious energy from that experience, from that light, from the sounds, from everything, I was still so afraid. Like my primal instincts kicked in. I basically didn't sleep that night. I was emotionally really overwhelmed, and I woke up the next morning in like cold sweat. I barely slept. It was crazy. It was a really physical bodily reaction to what had happened, even though nothing bad happened. But it was so, like, such a primal fear that came up for me. I've never had anything happen like that ever before and ever again after that. It was literally like a primal fear that humans only have when something that is far more advanced or something like that is like a threat, a perceived threat to them. I don't think that is like something normal that you have every other day. It was really, really intense. If you think that's the whole story now, it isn't. The next morning, the first thing I did was open my front door, try to reconstruct what happened that night, and I realized, wait a second, this is not even possible. The angle that I saw from my door, from the little window that is in my door, it wasn't even possible for me to see it like that. And I realized, oh shit, like this goes much deeper. It wasn't possible for me to see it like that. Because theoretically, the neighbor's house should have blocked the view, at least like 2/3 of it. And it didn't. The house didn't exist when I saw this light. I had a view straight to the forest, no houses in between me and the forest, just like a view directly to the trees. And that is not how it really is. That is not how this street is built. So I was really confused. I was even more confused when I realized that theoretically the view should have been blocked. It wasn't possible for me to see this. But I distinctly remember seeing trees at the place where the neighbor's house is. So I was thinking, like, did I peek into another dimension? Did I get a peek into something that I was not supposed to see, or what happened? Because that was the only explanation that in this dimension that I had a peek in, this house wasn't there, and the street was different and the area was different. So it really confused me even more to try to reconstruct it. And even years later, when I was at this place, I try, like every time I was there, I tried to make it make sense. I try to reconstruct what had happened, because to this day, I still don't know exactly what happened. I remember that there was no house in that vision, in that peeking into this dimension. There was no house, but it still doesn't make sense from a human standpoint, from a logical standpoint. So I'm still wondering what had happened. The really interesting stuff happened 1 week after this event, after this incident. About a week later, I had a very, very, very realistic and vivid dream in which I was contacted by tall, semi transparent, slender blue beings. These beings told me telepathically that this had been a little accident and that I saw something that I was not supposed to see. And they almost apologized for that to happen. And I could sense that they were also kind of almost like afraid that this would have consequences. But I felt a very peaceful energy coming from them. I felt that they were coming in peace. So cliche, but that's what I felt. They were somewhat fearful of me as well. And they didn't know how to really interact with me, but they wanted to bring that message of, oopsies, that was an accident. Let's forget about it. That was the energy I was getting. And there was no like bad energy coming from them, nothing at all. It actually calmed me after having this vivid dream, which was actually a visitation. It calmed me because I knew, okay, if that's the beings behind this incident, there's literally nothing to fear. Fast forward, this was back then, this was my first physical alien ET encounter. And the dream after that, like this contact in dream time, was one of my first visitations on the astral plane. So ever since then, I developed a connection to these beings, to other beings. They introduced me to other beings. A lot has happened since then. I really went down the rabbit hole into this topic, and it feels so real to me, and it's so crazy to me that I didn't make this happen. It came to me, like this whole experience, this whole new world that opened up around ETs, around higher dimensional beings. Like I said, it's almost been 10 years ever since this first encounter, this first physical encounter. A lot has happened between then and now, and I could tell a lot of these stories, but that was one of the most impressive to me because it was the beginning of it all. And looking back from my perspective and with all the wisdom and knowledge I have now, I think, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think it probably wasn't an accident. And they just wanted to test me. They wanted to see how I react and how I connect with them, how, yeah, how I react to this whole thing. Because after that, a whole series of visitations started. It was not negative. I also had negative experiences, but they're not connected to this these beings. So I think it was on purpose. It was something that I was meant to see, something that opened contact for me. And they tried to keep it low key and test the waters if I was ready for it. That's what I've learned now, or that's what I believe to be true. Like I said, nobody confirmed this to me. I wasn't able to confirm this, but this is what it feels like. And I know that higher dimensional beings, like benevolent beings, they like to test out how people react to their presence. And if they're very fearful, or if they're fearful for longer amounts of time, they will pull back. They are not here to scare you. They are not here to force contact if you're not ready for it. So I feel like it was one of those tests. And I passed it in the second visitation in dream time, where I was really open to communicate with them, and where I had like this immediate feeling of familiarity when I saw these blue transparent beings. If you ever saw the movie Knowing, at the very end of this movie, there is an alien ship coming down to Earth, and beings go off board and they change into their light bodies. When I watched this movie for the first time, I didn't expect anything. I just watched this movie. I didn't know what was coming. And these beings popped up. I started bawling my eyes out. I had such a physical, emotional, everything reaction, because these beings in this movie look exactly how I see these extraterrestrial beings I'm in touch with. They nailed it, like down to the T. I always say the producer or the people behind that movie, they must have channeled it, whether they know it or not. This is exactly how they look like. So if you want to see how these light beings look like and how these higher dimensional extraterrestrials look like, watch that movie and you will know. I feel like that was the test for me, and that was the beginning of a long period of building contact, learning from them, getting downloads, learning in dream time, being visited several nights a week. It was a crazy time. It isn't like that right now. It hasn't been like that for a long time, actually, which I'm sometimes a little bit sad about, because I loved connecting with these beings. I loved learning from them. But back then, it was the time for that, I feel like. And it was magical, it was powerful. I hope to have that again at some point, to have that level of connectedness. It wasn't all that spooky, I now realize, even though this is the Halloween edition. But I hope I could draw you in with my story. And maybe I'm also helping someone who has experienced something similar, because I know there is a lot of contactees out there who are afraid to share what they are experiencing, who are afraid of the ridicule, afraid of the judgment, afraid of being called insane. I'm really aware of that. I know that you can get massively judged for speaking up about things like that. I know that a lot of people are assuming that you are crazy or that you have paranoia or, I don't know, a mania, whatever it is, you know the truth. So if you have experienced something like this, or if you are experiencing something like this, maybe even something negative, because that's also a part of that. It's not all rainbows and butterflies. Make sure to find someone who actually believes you, or to get in touch with people who had similar experiences. We have the internet, we have social media, we have opportunities to get in touch with each other, and make sure to talk about it and to find out what you can do about it if you feel like it's happening to you without any consent, or if you feel like it's nothing that is a good connection, it's like something negative. I'm not going to talk about this today, but there are negative experiences, and especially if you're experiencing those, don't let this be brushed off by others telling you you're insane. Find someone who actually listens, who actually understands, and who helps you cope with this, or who helps you do something against it. So, I didn't want to be so preachy, but I felt like it was necessarily to point that out. A lot of people are experiencing this. It is not a phenomenon that is coming from crazy minds around the globe. It is a real thing. It can be positive, it can be negative. It's scary at all times when you first experience it because it's just a human instinct kicking in. And yeah, that was my Halloween story. Let me know if you had similar experiences to this, if you had any alien encounters in your life, and share your story in the comments. I would love to read all of them. That being said, as always, I hope you learned something new. I hope you were a little bit spooked out for this Halloween episode. And I am seeing you in the next video or podcast episode, depending on where you're watching or listening to this. Have a beautiful, spooky week. Bye bye.